I have the honor to introduce Harvey Leonard. I'm just going to give a little introduction to him that I copied off of the website. But I knew about this 1978 storm. Harvey Leonard is WCVB Channel 5 Chief Meteorologist. He joined the station in 2002 as a Storm Team 5 Co-Chief Meteorologist with his longtime friend Dick Albert, who retired in 2009. Prior to joining WCVB, Leonard served as the Chief Meteorologist for WHDH-TV for 25 years. Widely regarded as Boston's top meteorologist, Leonard has received numerous awards throughout his career, and he earned 4 New England Emmy Awards for outstanding achievement in television weathercasting. He is a fellow of the American Meteorologists Society and was awarded their prestige Outstanding Service Award by a broadcast meteorologist, which recognized and launched his work on national level. He is credited as the first meteorologist to correctly predict, and I knew this, and I told everybody, and no one believes me, the impact and intensity of the blizzard of '78. He was the only one who predicted this. It's unbelievable. Leonard received a bachelor's degree of science in meteorologist from the City College of New York and earned a master's of science degree in meteorology from New York University, where he also serves as an instructor in meteorology. Please welcome our favorite weather expert, Harvey Leonard.
Thank you so much. If my mother was still alive, she would probably say, such an introduction. But thank you so much for that. I greatly appreciate it. It is great to be here. It's an honor for me to be here. And I want to add my congratulations to Peggy and to Speaker DeLeo. And by the way, he was commenting, why he's dressed the way he is today. That's because I went into his closet and I took his good clothes. So that's why he's a little more casual today. But anyway, thanks for all that you do. You're clearly a person of the people, yes. And everybody recognizes that. And thank you for all. A couple of other things I want to mention. A little bit of my connections to the area. I do live in Natick. However, I'm sure a fair number of you remember the name E. Arthur King, who was a great Winthrop historian. And he had gotten in touch with me decades ago, and we established a little bit of a relationship. A great guy, and he got me to come to Winthrop Cable TV. This is a couple of decades ago. And we did a program there, which was really nice. Somebody else that I would like to mention, at the risk of embarrassing him a little bit, somebody who's done great work, not only as a weather observer, but extremely weather knowledgeable, and has done an awful lot to help people, especially in the serious coastal storms. And that is Robbie Weinstein. So over there, Robbie, please stand up for Nicole, and Robbie, for both Winthrop and Revere especially, has been great. And I mean, when those storms come, he's in touch with everybody, the fire department, the police, potential rescue people, and he's definitely been a tremendous help to the weather community and to your community. So thank you, Robbie, for all you've done for many years. All right. I'm going to get into the important subject matter of the day, but just if anybody cares, a little quick background, how I got to this position. But I was always fascinated in storms ever since I was a little kid, and most especially winter storms. But winter storms, tropical storms, hurricanes, and then we come to severe thunderstorms and of course tornadoes. But the things that always captured me were the winter storms, because I was amazed. And by the way, I didn't grow up here. I grew up in New York. I grew up actually in the Bronx. Okay? All right? That shouldn't change your opinion of me. Because never a Yankee fan. Okay? My father was a big sports fan, but he always rooted for the underdogs. And when I was a little boy in New York, there was not only the New York Yankees, but there were the New York Giants and the Brooklyn Dodgers, the Pums. And he always rooted for the underdog, and the Brooklyn Dodgers were the underdog. So we always rooted for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and if you rooted for the Brooklyn Dodgers, you did not like the New York Yankees. So when I came to New England in 1974, it was a very easy transition to become a Red Sox fan, because 95% of the prerequisites are disliking the Yankees. So that was very easy. And I am a passionate sports fan, and it's another one of my passions. But getting back to weather, so it was really the storms that always got me so excited, and that's never changed all the way up to this day. Usually I'm working if there's a snowstorm, but if I am at home while it's snowing, I love to look every 5 minutes out the window. And, my wife is saying, why is your nose pressed up against the glass? You just did that 5 minutes ago. And I go, honey, we've been married over 40 years. How can you still fight me on this? Don't you know I can't control it? I mean, if that's my worst fault, it's not too bad. But anyway, so the storms are always did it. Of course, the blizzard of '78 occurred in my first winter in Boston. So that was pretty interesting. And I had spent 3 years forecasting on Channel 12 in Providence, Rhode Island, before coming up to Boston. Then the 25 years at Channel 7, and the chance to join Dick Albert. Even though we were competitors for 25 years, we were good personal friends. And sadly, very sad that Dick passed on last August. A huge loss, number one, to his family, and number two, to the entire community of everybody who knew Dick and loved him. A great, great guy, great meteorologist, great person, and a great friend. So it was a tough loss. But getting back to the weather and the storms, the chance to go over to Channel 5, and that's where I've been for the last, I guess, 15 or 16 years. And just one comment, and I do understand that. It is one of the biggest problems we face when we have these fierce nor'easters, ocean storms, coastal storms. And we know that it's going to seriously affect the entire east coast of Massachusetts. There are many, many communities involved. And obviously, this is front and center. But it's impossible for us to be everywhere. We usually get our biggest criticisms from the North Shore, that we're on the South Shore more than the North Shore. We get a lot of complaints, from people all along the North Shore. But it's just you just can't be everywhere, unfortunately. But we hope to do, better with this community in the future. We hope there's hardly a need, but the reality is there probably will be. So something that is probably on your mind, seeing that I'm here, the timing is unbelievable. Here because of the January 4th storm, that's, I'm sure, part of the invitation, and yet we've now had two pretty fierce storms, to say the least. The first of the two for the coast, obviously, as has been described, without precedent. Oh, thanks. Thanks. What did you put in there? So in any event, so here we are with that storm, which was unbelievable. And then we get another storm a few days later. And, then we have this possibility, as of late last week, the last day I actually worked on the air was Thursday. And I remember talking about two ways this could play out, because we kind of have like two jet streams this time of the year. One is what we call the northern jet stream, which kind of drives the cold air in, and the southern jet stream, which can bring the moisture up. When the two of them are minding their own business, for the most part, things usually don't get too bad. But if the two of them join up in just the wrong spot, then it's a whole different outcome. And I actually remember Thursday night on the air, when it was uncertain, talking about and saying, imagine if you're whitewater rafting, okay? You're bouncing along the rapids, and you look up ahead, and you see there's a stream that goes this way, and a stream that goes that way. And you are right in the dead center, okay? You do not know which stream is going to grab you. But think of it, whichever one is going to be so different than the other path. So that's the way it is with storms and rivers of air called the jet stream. And so when it is going to be close to whether things link up or they don't link up at all, it is two wildly different solutions. One could be a major snowstorm, the other can be a complete miss. And until you can make that determination, you really can't make that call. It isn't a question of, are we going to get 3 to 6 inches? Or no, we may get nothing, or we may get clobbered. Oh, wow, thanks. But that's the reality, especially at that point in time. Well, now I can tell you it's come into better focus, and it's not great, because they are going to link up, and we are going to have yet another major storm, major coastal storm, major ocean storm, major nor'easter. Thankfully, the tides are far lower astronomically, so we don't have that compounding effect. But this one has the potential to produce a lot of snow. It is a late season storm. This one looks like it's going to get underway roughly around midnight tomorrow night, and will go through most of the day on Tuesday. Now, some of the things we actually have to try to take into account because of the time of the year is that if this storm is still going significantly, and it's noontime on Tuesday, if it's snowing heavily, and we already have a significant amount of snow on the ground, it will continue to accumulate. However, if it winds up coming in bands, where it's heavy snow and then it turns light, well, as soon as it turns light, at this time of the year, you're actually going to start getting some melting of what's on the ground, and you won't get additional accumulation. So we have certain things that we have to try to take into account that we wouldn't if this were happening 2 months earlier. In any event, the way it looks to me right now, the latest that I looked at before coming here, was that we will have enough of a base of accumulation by the time we get to the daylight hours of Tuesday morning. And it looks like, for the most part, it's going to snow very hard Tuesday morning, midday, and early afternoon. And I think it will offset what we call the sky brightness, the angle of the sun, on top of which it looks a little bit colder, this storm, than the last storm. Hoping that maybe it won't be quite as wet a snow, but that's a close call, because the low-level temperatures can't get that cold usually this time of the year. But we may actually have a situation that even though we're going through the daylight hours of Tuesday, the temperature may actually be falling. So we may start out around 32 and actually fall lower. And that reminds me of a storm that occurred back in 1982, April 6th and 7th. All right? Now, that was not only a blizzard with a lot of heavy snow, but the most unusual aspect about that being such a late season storm, spring storm, it was a powder blizzard. The temperature dropped during the day, and a record low temperature on the second day of the storm, April 7th, was set at noontime. When the angle of the sun is so high, it dropped to 17 degrees during the storm. So even though this is a time of the year where normally they're heavy and wet snows, they don't always have to be that way. So this is going to start out as a wetter snow because the surface temperatures will be fairly mild at the start. And it starts around midnight tomorrow night. But actually will probably continue to slowly fall during the storm until we get near the end of it late Tuesday evening. That's how it looks right now. So I would say, and I actually sent out a tweet a couple of hours ago, that the chances of getting 6 inches or more of snow are very high, and the chances of getting 12 inches or more are a realistic possibility. And we'll have to see how the ratios play out, the moisture and rain and snow. But it does look like that's going to produce at least 1 inch, and maybe even all the way up to 2 inches possibly, of liquid equivalent moisture. And it will have wind. The wind will be picking up, start to pick up tomorrow afternoon and evening a little bit out of the east, and then into the night it'll become east-northeast. During the overnight it'll become northeast and stronger. Then it'll become north-northeast by Tuesday morning, actually become north by midday, and then northwest during the afternoon. And we may actually get the last part of the storm is what we call like a backlash. So, Now, of course, you're sorry you ever invited me here. It's like, I needed to hear this. I mean, it's my weekend. It's a nice Sunday afternoon. He's got to bring me down again. You know, but we are in a type of blocking pattern. But that actually leads me to a related topic. And it's already been addressed by the distinguished speakers who have already spoken before you today. By the way, I want to compliment each and every one of you in this room for your interest, your concern, and your involvement in the environment. That's what we need. That's what we need everybody to be. And we need all of our political leaders, like Speaker DeLeo, to also be aware and not be blockheaded and stubborn and have weird interests and not really see the picture as it is. Now, in talking about this, all right, I'll be very honest with you. When we talk about the topic of climate change, if you were to have spoken to me about this 20 to 30 years ago, and you said, is there really going to be a problem with climate change? I'd say, I doubt it. I don't really think so. Why would I have said that? Well, first of all, I'm a meteorologist. I'm a forecaster. When I went to college and did undergraduate and graduate work, I'm learning all about the general circulation of the atmosphere and the patterns, and you realize our planet is vast, our atmosphere is large, it has a lot of height, width, length, and so on. And so at first I said, you know, it almost seems kind of arrogant to think that we as human beings could actually have an impact on this vast climate and our atmosphere and this incredible, you know, atmospheric machine, which all starts because of the sun heating our planet differentially, and that starts temperature differences, which starts wind differences, and then you get the battle zones between the cold and the warm, and you get your storms, and the atmosphere is trying to achieve a balance which it can never fully achieve because the planet is not being heated evenly, because of the way that the Earth rotates on its axis and revolves around the sun. And that's what I would have said, because that's where my expertise would be weather patterns, okay? Now, as time has gone on, and as I've become more open-minded, and when I attend annual broadcast meteorology conferences, I take short courses. There have been a number of them on climate change. And I get to see some of the people in our field, the environmental scientists, the PhDs who are doing the research, and I see what they're finding. And you learn more, and then you realize that the greenhouse gases, the tremendous increase in greenhouse gases, is clearly having an effect. The greenhouse effect is physics. It works. Walk into a greenhouse, it's warmer. And so that's a warming. Now, of course, a lot of people, remember 3 years ago, we had that incredible stretch of 4 unbelievable major storms, like 80 inches of snow in 2.5 weeks, and it was bitter cold from late January to really mid to late March. And people were saying to me, hey, Harvey, where's global warming when you really need it? Okay? All right? And that is normal, because we react to where we are right now. And let's remember, we are one little tiny area of a vast planet. Even during that period of time, if you looked at the entire planet and you took the averages, it was above average. And we've been above average planet-wise year after year now for like the last 50 years. And a lot of them have been the warmest, you know, over the 50 years, or top 3 or top 5. We know polar ice caps are either melting or retreating. We see all this. And 97% of climate scientists are in strong agreement that this is real, this is happening, and it's only going to get worse. And they've even talked about some of the things to expect. The warming has been most significant up in the polar regions, okay? And that has disrupted the jet stream to some extent. Not every single day, it's not like that, but it has. And what it's done is, instead of weather systems moving along most of the time, you know, with a fair decent speed all around the world, it's making them bumpy, it's making them undulate up and down instead of just across. That creates larger systems, larger high pressure areas, stronger storms, slower moving storms. And the prediction was always going to be that we're going to run into this type of a thing. We're going to have more heavy precipitation events, more droughts, more extremes. We're already seeing it. So instead of this, maybe starting to happen decades from now, there's a lot of evidence this is already underway, okay? Now, it is a little bit difficult to quantify this super specifically for this reason. Now let's think back to the 1950s, for those who could remember or have heard of it. Rash of hurricanes. So if that happened now, everybody would say, climate change, climate change, climate change, all right? So let's remember that these storms, these kinds of storms, we've always had them. We've had them in the past, we'll have them in the future. However, this is what I think needs to be said. Because if something is said with proper balance, it carries more weight. Too many times something is being said because somebody is advocating for something. And so they're biased that way and they just want to get their point across, okay? But here's the deal. We know sea level is slowly rising, all right? So if you take the same kind of storm now that we had 50 years ago, and you make it hit an area where the sea level is a little bit higher, then the same exact storm is going to do more damage than it did 50 years ago. Now, we know that not only is the planet warming, but the oceans are warming. So now, if you take a cold air mass in place, and you contrast that with an even warmer ocean, now you're going to get an even stronger storm. So now you may have storms that are a little bit stronger than they otherwise would have been, and the sea levels a little bit higher. And both these trends, unchecked, are going to keep going that way. So that means the frequency, or first of all, the impact of the storms are going to be a little bit greater than they were in the past. And when you're talking about situations like, you know, is the water level going to come over? All right, are we going to get flooded or not? Or is the flooding just going to be on the shore roads? Is it going to get into basements? Or are we going to have big waves, even bigger waves than we've had in the past? We know the waves do a lot of the destruction, and so on. So now let's take what we already know and extrapolate it into the future. On top of which, we have more structures in harm's way than we did decades ago. We have more people in harm's way. We certainly hope with warnings that people will take them seriously, and so we can save lives. That's the number one thing we want to save. And the number two thing, of course, is property. But it also means, what about the protections that are in place? Marshes, wetlands, and so on. I mean, the last thing that should ever be done is to eliminate or diminish that. We need every protection we can get. We need sea levels to be even stronger or reinforced. I mean, it can't be the other way around, or we're asking for trouble and more trouble and more trouble. So it's not that every year we're going to run into this 10-day or 2-week period that we're experiencing now. But we are going to occasionally do it. The idea is it's going to happen with somewhat greater frequency than it has in the past. So that's basically, I think, the balanced and sensible way to look at this. Okay? If you just jump and say a certain storm was caused by climate change, you might be hurting the cause you're trying to get across. But if you're saying that that storm was possibly made a little stronger by climate change, and possibly will happen with a little more frequency than before, and continue to be a little more powerful if we don't do anything, then that's the sensible and responsible statement that you hope will encourage the idea of doing whatever we possibly can. And, you know, and so on. And of course, a lot of times people say, what can I do as one person? You know, because, you know, we need everybody to cooperate, we need the world to cooperate. Well, first of all, when you think about what could I do as one person, if we all thought that way, then, you know, why would anybody vote? Because everybody said, well, my vote's not going to count. So if every single person thought that way, then we don't have a democracy anymore, right? So it's important for everybody to do his or her part. It's important for organizations, it's important for states, it's important for the country, and hopefully for the world to see what's actually happening. And for those who tend to still be doubters and say, well, you know, a lot of things can be done with this research and with numbers and with statistics, that is true to a certain extent. But to me, and some would say, well, you know, the researchers who are coming up with these conclusions, don't forget, as long as they come up with conclusions that there are concerns they get continued funding and they get to keep their jobs. These are what some skeptics, sometimes say. And I say, gee, could any of that be going on? It could be a little bit of that. Some people, they're human. It's possible. They could be a little biased by that. But I think that you would have to believe that there's an academic worldwide conspiracy going on for you to really think that what's coming up in terms of research by the climate scientists has no basis. I think that's ridiculous at this point. That's how I see it. And again, I'm not the one doing the research. I'm trying to stay educated on it as best I can. And another thing that comes up is people have said to me a lot, Harvey, why don't you speak more about climate change on the air? This is important, this is serious. I get emails about this, and I understand and respect it. This is a great forum to be able to do this. Why? Because I get to speak about something. I get to put it in a certain perspective. I have the time to do that. I don't have anywhere near the time to do that in the weathercast. And if you just make little blurbs, little statements, you're going to get misinterpreted. You're not going to be able to do it with balance and perspective, and you're going to cause more problems than you are. So that's what I've been doing when I am able to get out and speak to groups such as yourselves, this wonderful group. That's the time when I can address the issue with some context and some depth. Very hard to do that, unless we do it in a long form type of show, which we could do, and maybe we will, sometime in the near future, like a show like Chronicle, devoting an entire show to the topic. That's what really needs to be done. Not little blurbs within a weathercast. Is not, I don't think, the way to treat climate change. And somebody else sent me an interesting email, and I thought about this, and I said, pretty interesting. Said, everybody talks about climate change. Said, I think it should be called climate disruption. Very interesting point, because what's going on is, in a sense, disrupting the climate. Okay, and that's what's happening. So just imagine anything that's moving along nice and smoothly runs into some obstacles, and then there are bumps and undulations, and this is what's happening. We're getting more bumps, more undulations, more big ones, and that's how you get bigger storms, slower moving storms, and on average we're going to see that with greater frequency. So that's why I do think there is concern, definitely concern going forward. So again, that's why. Kudos to all of you for what you do, and you're all about the right things. And let's protect the marsh, no question about it, and all the others that can be protected as well. Now I could go on and on because I can tend to do that. But at this point, there are some comments and questions and things that maybe. They could be criticisms, that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. Sure.
I'm just wondering, why is it that the water is getting higher in the New England area than in, comparative to other parts of the country?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, it's just that we're kind of a vulnerable area to begin with. As I said, we are vulnerable to these types of storms, all right? We do run into patterns. Any time of the year, really. Of course, snow is a bigger risk in the winter, obviously, but any time of the year, when you have large high-pressure areas in the high latitudes, and then we have a moisture source, a massive moisture source just to our east, the Atlantic Ocean. So when storms can tap into that, and become slow-moving, that's a massive amount of moisture that can be deposited upon an area. So, we're also talking about, flooding. There's also river flooding, more river flooding with all of this. And the Northeast, by the way, in the United States, has been the area that has seen the greatest increase in the frequency of heavy precipitation events. We get over an inch, over 2 inches, sometimes over 3 inches of liquid now, like it's a regular occurrence. And that just didn't used to be like that. So again, they're even more moist, they're even more frequent. A warmer world is a wetter world by definition, because warm air is capable of holding more moisture than cold air. So that's another thing. Now, one thing that may happen, the storm that we just had, no two things ever happen the same in the atmosphere anyway, but perhaps 10, 20, 30 years from now, if we have the same exact setup, instead of that being that heavy, wet, pasty snow, which you only get when you're very close to the rain-snow line, in a slightly warmer world, it could be a rainstorm. Okay? And some of the drier snows that we get now, they might become wetter snows going out in the future. So this is how things may be. But it's not like I can give you a date and a time or anything like that. But that's where we're probably going to slowly move toward, most likely. Oh, lots of nice questions. Okay, sure.
Okay, sure. So thank you for coming today. My question is, what are the 1 or 2 action items that we as a country should be doing to mitigate these circumstances which are clearly going to be continuing?
Right. Well, I mean, to me, some of the more obvious ones are to use as much clean, renewable sources of energy. The sun is the obvious number one. A lot of things, of course, come into technology. They come into cost, money, and things like that. But hopefully, the clean and renewable sources of energy, we get into wind, and we've had so many issues with wind and, wind energy in the oceans and so on. But what about the birds? This is the problem. Sometimes you do have conflicting, issues where you're helping one thing, but you're causing a problem, in another area, and you have to make some difficult choices and decisions. But I would say the burning of coal and oil is what puts a lot of the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So obviously burning less coal and oil is going to help, not only for our country, but hopefully for the world. But things move along. Everybody says, well, if you do that, that's going to cost jobs for some people, in parts of the country. But new technologies create new jobs. Things evolve over time. And that's what we need. We need evolution of that. The other thing we need to do is we need to protect the protections certainly that are in place already, the wetlands and the marshes and things like that. We need protection. And we need to take advantage of that and not start to massively or continue to massively develop where there are protections. I'm not an expert in this, so I don't even know, but some of the issues that are even happening in some of these storms in the seaport area, it's beautiful things have been done in the seaport area, but that may be, causing some other concerns. So things can be trade-offs, and you got to think about what you're trading off. Sure. Yeah, one right behind the other. Okay.
I'm Carol, I'm with Mothers Out Front, and I had to make a suggestion.
Sure.
When you said about people being active, and what everybody in the room really needs to do, I know, is somebody that's very active. You're talking about accelerating clean energy, and Mothers Out Front knows that's our purpose, is for a swift, just, and complete transition to clean energy. It's got to do with making policies. And if we're going to get these policies in place in Massachusetts, I think that we are working with our legislators. And I think everybody in the room needs to call Speaker DeLeo. If you were to ask Barbara Bishop, I think she's probably here. And she always tells me, she'll tell you the same thing, not enough people are calling. And she says those phone calls are very effective, that she really does not get that many phone calls to tell them that we want those policies in place. We've been trying for a long time to get raise the renewable portfolio standard to at least 3%. That's a very simple policy. It simply says it's how much the electric utilities let on the grid. There's Barbara standing up. How much the electric companies on the grid, how much electricity they have to let in their mix with to make your electricity. And if the law doesn't make them raise that, they're not going to raise it. Every year they have to raise it 1% more. And the study went out months ago to show if they raise it to 3% or more, we're going to get way more jobs, at least 30,000, about 37,000, close to 40,000 more jobs by 2030. It's a great situation. We need that bill. We need the carbon tax pricing. We need a lot of things. He needs those phone calls, and tell him that. Okay.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, and I'm not I'm not even a political person, so I'm not going to get into politics, but I think more than ever, things have to happen on a state level right now, because if we rely on the current administration, this is not where heads are at. So I think it's even more incumbent upon states to be the advocates. Yes?
Hi. What causes thunder snow? What is that?
Oh. Yeah, thunder snow. Yeah, I know. Actually, there have been a lot of, more than you realize, lot of classic, strong nor'easters that are producing snow in the winter can actually have elements of snow. What's happening is, first of all, it's very, very heavy bursts of precipitation, which are more common in the summertime. Like when you get a thunderstorm in the summer, it buckets. So if you're going to get thunder snow in a winter storm, you can get tremendous snowfall rates while that's going on. It has to do with the temperature structure, and what we're really getting is a cold pocket, very cold pocket of air coming in at high levels of the atmosphere, and at certain temperatures, that's when the electrical attractions can take place in the atmosphere. So when we get these certain types of intense winter coastal storms, we can have that. And we had it most recently, yeah, in the most recent storm. Doesn't mean that every community experiences it, but just like thunderstorms don't happen everywhere either. But yeah, and that's another thing we're finding out, which is also making, sometimes the more you learn, the more you realize there's still to learn. And so now we're seeing with these storms, these winter storms, a lot of the real intense snow comes in bands. And so if you're in between the bands, your amounts may be significantly lower than both sides of you. So that's why when sometimes we say ranges, it's even difficult, because sometimes we get these intense bands and they get stuck for hours in one place. And so you get one place that's 18 inches of snow, and then 20 miles away they have 6 inches. So, how are you going to deal with that in terms of, forecasting amounts if you really can't determine exactly where those bands may set up, but you're likely to get the bands. So, yes, Alderman.
Hi. Could you comment on the event where there was a tremendous, maybe a microburst of snow that tied up Starrow Drive and caused gridlock a few years back? Are you familiar with that one?
Wow, I don't know. I know there was one storm.
Like an hour or two. And
Yeah, there was one storm. I actually wasn't here for this particular one. It occurred in, I don't know, somewhere maybe a little shy of 2010. It was in an early to mid-afternoon, and there was some incredible snowfall amounts with incredible wind gusts, not with snow, on Cape Cod. So in other words, it was what we call convective elements, which normally get in the summertime with thunderstorms. And I think Haverhill wound up with like 22 inches of snow, and was supposed to get 3 to 6 inches of snow. The amazing thing about that is, I remember there was something that was written, I think, in the Boston Herald, and they had a few meteorologists' pictures in there, including mine, about blowing it and all this and that. And I get back and I look at this and I go, boy, this is really tough. When you get creamed and you're like out of the country during a storm, that's really tough. I guess that's the definition of guilt by association. But anyway, there was a storm like that, and that really caused a lot of problems, because if I remember correctly, I think it was like a December 23rd or something like that. So think about this. And you get 22 inches of snow in Haverhill, you're expecting 3 to 6. It's 2 days before Christmas. How many people, are still scrambling around the last couple of days, not expecting this, and now you can't get around. So a lot of people were pretty upset about that. But I think the specific one, I just don't recall the Starrow Drive specific, unless it was, about how long ago was that?
About 7 years ago.
Yeah, it might have been that. I'm not really sure. Yeah. But by the way, just the other night, again, it might have been a little experienced slightly differently in different communities. But when we were getting all the rain and then it flipped over to snow, in a lot of places when that went from rain to heavy wet snow, the transition was only a few minutes. And once it did, even with a temperature above freezing, it was coming down so heavily, everything got covered like instantly. And, and some places had up to 3 inches an hour, but a little bit away from the shoreline, where the snow was also wet, but it's so wet in that particular case on the water, the ratio is hard for the snow to really pile up that high. But of course, it has a lot of weight and is really difficult, to move around, which is a real problem with that storm.
2 more questions, please, and then we have to let him go. So, 2 more questions. You can take anybody one.
Let him go, gee.
Oh, we don't want to keep you here forever.
Okay. That's not Channel 5 management speaking, is it? Yes.
Harvey, where you gonna be building the retirement home?
Well, that's, where did that question come from? No, who asked it? Oh, you asked, okay. Well, I don't know, I can't answer that. I honestly don't know. Definitely at the point where, talk about it, and I'm kind of torn, to be quite honest, because on the one hand, by the way, I'm a very blessed person, okay? I mean, I've got a wonderful wife, 2 terrific daughters, 2 great son-in-laws, and 4 grandkids. 2 who are local, 2 are in Manhattan, in New York. And I'm very close to them all, so family is very, very important to me. I also still love what I do. I still have the passion. So, and it's difficult because it's hard to really diminish your role that greatly on television because television is all about visibility. So I've probably reached a point where honestly, if I could, I'd like to be off the warmer time of the year. But realistically, how do you do that? Viewers who are nice enough to watch are going to say, what happened to him? Did he quit? Did he retire? Did he get fired? Is he sick? Did he die? Did he go to another station? So you can't do it to that point. But I've tried to stack the deck a little bit so that I'm on more in the winter and less in the nicer time of the year. Okay, so if you are nice enough to watch Channel 5 a lot, and you do watch it, you go through periods of time, out of the snow season and go, where's Harvey? Just say, well, I didn't hear that you retired, so chances are he's just enjoying more time off playing tennis. Yeah, as long as the body holds up, I'll do as much of that as I can too. Yes.
What about the multiple tornadoes that they're having down in the Midwest?
Which tornado?
Multiple, there's so many of them. Is that also caused by the jet stream?
Oh, tornadoes. Okay, now that's a very interesting thing because in terms of projecting the future about tornadoes, not necessarily that we're going to have more tornadoes. We don't really know that one. Yes, more thunderstorms, okay? Because that's a warm weather phenomenon, it's a warmer world. But tornadoes are a little bit different. Now, if it seems like there are more tornadoes than ever around the country, that's because of detection and coverage in the media, okay? That's why it seems that way. Because the media has become weather nuts, to be honest with you. It's weather great. Now, weather's important. And, look, I've been in this long enough, and the field has come a long way. We didn't talk about that. Both our computer models, our forecasting accuracy, certainly not perfect, but it's come a long way. Of course, as it's come a long way, it's normal. Your expectations go up. So, now it's like, for example, I remember one time a couple of years ago, I forecast between 1 and 3 inches of snow. And I get an email from somebody in Stoughton. It said, Harvey, the snow ended here, and I had 3/4 of an inch of snow. I have never, ever seen anybody be so wrong in my life. Wow, tough crowd. Now, if you go a couple of decades ago, if snow was in the forecast for the second day, you'd say, probably changed, but that's how we get to it. So, we've come a long way. But the younger someone is, then the more they only know what's been most recent, and so the expectations go up, okay? Now, of course, all the stations, to be honest, have strong weather teams in Boston. There's a lot of good meteorologists, and they're all promoting them, and we're all using, technology. So the promotions, like, oh, we have the experience, and it might imply that we're going to get every single thing correct to the 10th of an inch, and to this and that, and so on. And certain systems are more certain weather patterns are more predictable than others, and especially with regard to time frames, okay? So that's what we deal with. Another thing is we're now able to spot, like sometimes we might be able to spot the possibility of a big storm, maybe at times even up to a week away. And so the hope is that, okay, now each day that we get closer, I as a forecaster will learn more about it. I can advance the story for the viewers. But what may happen is, as you get closer to it, what's actually coming into focus are all the complications that the storm is going to present, like rain, snow lines, and things like that. So it doesn't always work that way. And so you may be hearing, my God, I've been hearing about this storm for a week. Now, lo and behold, if the storm doesn't do much, then it's going to be, oh my God, they drove me crazy for a week. Look at this, a big deal. That's what they made a big deal about. Now, of course, in the last week and a half, that's not what we're hearing because they've been terrible storms. So it's a different story. But I do believe that this is the last one in this specific pattern. So I'm not saying we're going to be 80 degrees after it ends or anything like that, but I think this is the last one, the last type of supermaker storm. And just to give you an example, another little quick example about why I think climate change is real, even though I normally don't pick one specific thing to make an example of. All right, so in February, this year it seems March is the new February, because February was real warm. So that day that we were, 2 days in a row, we were like in the 70s, remember that? And Fitchburg hit 80 degrees one day, all right? Now, Boston has hit 70 degrees 4 times now, and 3 of them have been in the last 2 years. The only times Boston's got to 70. So it's one thing when you break a record, but when you break records by like 12 and 13 degrees for a date, and Fitchburg hits 80 degrees in February, something seems a little off here, or some things are happening a little bit differently than they've happened in the past. And of course, sure enough, it was 80 degrees, and the next day, although the ground was warm, didn't really accumulate, snowed. Okay? You know, what is that the definition of? New England weather! Anyway, I thank you so much for having me.